Chapter 5 of The Diamond Master by Jacques Futrelle. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 5. The Astute Mr. Birnes. It was a few minutes past 4 o'clock when Mr. Wynne strode through the immense retail sales department of the H. Latham Company, and a uniformed page held open the front door for him to pass out. Once on the sidewalk, the self-styled diamond master of the world paused long enough to pull on his gloves, carelessly chucking the small sole-leather grip with its $20-odd million worth of precious stones under one arm. Then he turned up Fifth Avenue toward 34th Street. A sneak thief brushed past him, appraised him with one furtive glance, then went his way, seeking quarry more promising. Simultaneously with Mr. Wynne's appearance, three men whose watchful eyes had been fastened on the doorway of the H. Latham Company for something more than an hour stirred. One of them, Frank Claflin, was directly across the street, strolling along idly, the most purposeless of all in the hurrying, well-dressed throng. Another, Steve Birnes, chief of the Birnes Detective Agency, appeared from the hallway of a building adjoining the H. Latham Company, and moved along behind Mr. Wynne, some 30 feet in the rear. The third, Jerry Malone, was half a block away up Fifth Avenue, coming slowly toward them. Mr. Birnes adjusted his pace to that of Mr. Wynne, step for step, and then, seeming assured of his safety from any chance glance, ostentatiously mopped his face with a handkerchief, flirting it a little to the left as he replaced it in his pocket. Claflin, across the street, understood from that he was to go on up Fifth Avenue to 34th Street, the next intersection, and turn west to board any crosstown car which Mr. Wynne might possibly take. And a cabby, who had been sitting motionless on his box down the street, understood from it that he was to move slowly along behind Mr. Birnes and be prepared for an emergency. Halfway between 33rd and 34th Streets, Jerry Malone approached and passed Mr. Wynne without so much as a glance at him, and went on toward his chief. "Drop in behind here," Mr. Birnes remarked crisply to Malone, without looking around. "I'll walk on ahead and turn east in 34th Street to nail him if he swings a car. Claflin's got him going west." Mr. Wynne was perhaps some 20 feet from the corner of 34th Street and Fifth Avenue when Mr. Birnes passed him. His glance lingered on the broad back of the chief reflectively as he swung by and turned into the cross street, after a quick, businesslike glance at an approaching car. Then Mr. Wynne smiled. He paused on the edge of the curb long enough for an automobile to pass, then went on across 34th Street to the uptown side, and turning flatly, looked Mr. Birnes over pensively, after which he leaned up against an electric pole and scribbled something on an envelope. A closed cab came wriggling and squirming up Fifth Avenue. As it reached the middle of 34th Street, Mr. Wynne raised his hand, and the cab drew up beside him. He said something to the driver, opened the door, and stepped in. Mr. Birnes smiled confidently. So that was it, eh? He too crossed 34th Street and lifted his hand. The cab which had been drifting along behind him immediately came up. "Now, Jimmy, get on the job," instructed Mr. Birnes as he stepped in. "Keep that chap in sight, and when he stops, you stop." Mr. Wynne's cab jogged along comfortably up the avenue, twisting and winding a path between the other vehicles. The while Mr. Birnes regarded it with a thoughtful gaze. Its number dangling on a white board in the rear, Mr. Birnes just happened to note it. "Grand Central Station, I'll bet a hat," he mused. But the closed cab didn't turn into 42nd Street. It went past, then on past Delmonico's, past the Cathedral, past the Plaza at 59th Street, and still on uptown. It was not hurrying. It merely moved along steadily, but once free of the snarl which culminates at the 59th Street entrance to Central Park, its speed increased a little. Past 64th Street, 65th, 66th, and 67th, it slowed up and halted at the sidewalk on the far side. "Stop in front of a door, Jimmy," directed the detective hastily. Jimmy obeyed gracefully, and Mr. Birnes stepped out, hardly half a block behind the closed cab. He went through an elaborate pretense of paying Jimmy, the while he regarded Mr. Wynne, who had also alighted and was paying the driver. The small sole leather grip was on the ground between his feet as he ransacked his pocket. A settlement was reached, the cabby nodded, touched his horse with his whip, and continued to jog up Fifth Avenue. "Now, he didn't order that chap to come back or wouldn't have paid him," the detective reasoned. "Therefore he's close to where he is going." But Mr. Wynne seemed in no hurry. Instead, he stood for a minute gazing after the retreating vehicle, which fact made it necessary for Mr. Birnes to start a dispute with Jimmy as to show how much the fare should be. They played the scene admirably. Had Mr. Wynne been listening, he might even have heard part of the vigorous argument. Whether he listened to the argument or not, he turned and gazed straight at Mr. Birnes, until finally the detective recognized the necessity of getting out of sight. With a final explosion he handed a bill to Jimmy and turned to go up the steps of the house. He had no business there, but he must do something. Jimmy turned the cab short and went rattling away down Fifth Avenue, to await orders in the lee of a corner a block or so away. And meanwhile, as Mr. Wynne still stood on the corner, Mr. Birnes had to go on up the steps. But as he placed his foot on the third step he knew, though he had not looked, apparently, yet he knew, that Mr. Wynne had raised his hand, and that in that hand was a small white envelope. And further he knew that Mr. Wynne was gazing directly at him. Now that was odd. Slowly it began to dawn upon the detective that Mr. Wynne was trying to attract his attention. If he heeded the signal, evidently it was intended as such, it would be a confession that he was following Mr. Wynne, and realizing this, he took 2 more steps up. Mr. Wynne waved the envelope again, after which he folded it across twice and thrust it into a crevice of a water plug beside him. Then he turned east along 67th Street and disappeared. The detective had seen the performance, all of it, and he was perplexed. It was wholly unprecedented. However, the first thing to do now was to keep Mr. Wynne in sight, so he came down the steps and walked rapidly on to 67th Street, pausing to peer around the corner before he turned. Mr. Wynne was idling along half a block away, without the slightest apparent interest in what was happening behind. Inevitably Mr. Birnes' eyes were drawn to the water plug across the street. A tag end of white paper gleamed tantalizingly. Now what the deuce did it mean? Being only human, Mr. Birnes went across the street and got the paper. It was an envelope. As he unfolded it and gazed at the address written in pencil, his mouth opened in undignified astonishment. It was addressed to him, Steve Birnes, chief of the Birnes Detective Agency. Mr. Wynne had still not looked back, so the detective trailed along behind, opening the envelope as he walked. A note inside ran briefly: "My address is number blank East 37th Street. If it is necessary for you to see me, please call there about 6 o'clock this afternoon. E. Van Cortlandt Wynne." Now here was perhaps as savory a kettle of fish as Mr. Birnes had ever stumbled upon. It is difficult to imagine a more embarrassing situation for a professional sleuth than to find himself suddenly taken into the confidence of the person he was shadowing. But was he being taken into Mr. Wynne's confidence? Ah, that was the question. Admitting that Mr. Wynne knew who he was, and admitting that he knew he was being followed, was not this apparent frankness an attempt to throw him off the scent? He would see, would Mr. Birnes. He quickened his pace a little, then slowed up instantly, because Mr. Wynne had stopped on the corner of Madison Avenue, and as a downtown car came rushing along, he stepped on to board it. Mr. Birnes scuttled across the street, and by a dexterous jump swung on the car as it fled past. Mr. Wynne had gone forward and was taking a seat. Mr. Birnes remained on the back platform, sheltered by the accommodating bulk of a fat man, and flattered himself that Mr. Wynne had not seen him. By peering over the huge shoulder the detective was still able to watch Mr. Wynne. He saw him pay his fare, and then he saw him place the small sole leather grip on his knees and unfasten the catch. Not knowing what was in that grip, Mr. Birnes was curious to see what came out of it. Nothing came out of it. It was empty. There was no question of this, for Mr. Wynne opened it wide and turned it upside down to shake it out. It didn't mean anything in particular to Mr. Birnes, the fact that the grip was empty, so he didn't get excited about it. Mr. Wynne left the car at 34th Street, the south end of the Park Avenue tunnel, by the front door, and the detective stepped off the rear end. Mr. Wynne brushed past him as he went up the stairs, and as he did so, he smiled a very little. He walked up Park Avenue to 37th Street, turned in there, and entered a house about the middle of the block with a latchkey. The detective glanced at the number of the house and felt aggrieved. It was the number that was written in the note. And Mr. Wynne had entered with a key, which meant, in all probability, that he did live there, as he had said. But why did he take that useless cab ride up Fifth Avenue? If he had no objection to anyone knowing his address, why did he go so far out of his way? Mr. Birnes couldn't say. As he pondered these questions he saw a maidservant come out of the house adjoining that which Mr. Wynne had entered, and he went up boldly to question her. Did Mr. Wynne live next door? Yes. How long had he lived there? 5 or 6 months. Did he own the house? No, the people who owned the house had gone to Europe for a year and had rented it furnished. No, Mr. Wynne didn't have a family. He lived there alone except for 2 servants, a cook and a housemaid. She had never noticed anything unusual about Mr. Wynne or the servants or the house. Yes, he went out every day downtown to business. No, she didn't know what his business was, but she had an idea that he was a broker. That was all. From a nearby telephone booth the detective detailed Claflin and Malone, who had returned to the office to keep a sharp watch on the house, after which he walked on to Fifth Avenue, and down Fifth Avenue to the establishment of H. Latham Company. Mr. Latham would see him, yes. In fact, Mr. Latham, harried by the events of the past 2 hours, bewildered by $100 million diamond deal, which had been thrust down his throat gracefully, but none the less certainly, and ridden by the keenest curiosity, was delighted to see Mr. Birnes. "I've got his house address all right," Mr. Birnes boasted in the beginning. Of course it was against the ethics of the profession to tell how he got it. "Progress already," commented Mr. Latham with keen interest. "That's good." Then the detective detailed the information he had received from the maid, adding thereto divers and sundry conclusions of his own. Mr. Latham marveled exceedingly. "He tried to shake us all right when he went out," Mr. Birnes went on to explain, "but the trap was set and there was no escape." With certain minor omissions he told of the cab ride to 67th Street, the trip across to a downtown car, and, as a matter of convincing circumstantial detail, added the incident of the empty gripsack. "Empty?" repeated Mr. Latham, startled. "Empty, did you say?" "Empty as a bass drum," the detective assured him complacently. "He turned it upside down and shook it out." "Then what became of them?" demanded Mr. Latham. "What became of what?" "The diamonds, man. What became of the diamonds?" "You didn't mention any diamonds to me except those 5 the other day," the detective reminded him coldly. "Your instructions were to find out all about this man, who he is, what he does, where he goes, and the rest. This is my preliminary report. You didn't mention diamonds." "I didn't know he would have them," Mr. Latham exploded irascibly. "That empty gripsack, man. When he left here he carried millions, I mean a great quantity, of diamonds in it." "A great quantity of the detective began, and then he sat up straight in his chair and stared at Mr. Latham in bewilderment. "If the gripsack was empty when he was on the car," Mr. Latham rushed on excitedly, "then don't you see he got rid of the diamonds somehow, from the time he left here until you saw the gripsack was empty. How did he get rid of them? Where does he keep them? And where does he get them?" Mr. Birnes closed his teeth grimly and his eyes snapped. Now he knew why Mr. Wynne had taken that useless cab ride up Fifth Avenue. It was to enable him to get rid of the diamonds. There was an accomplice. In detective parlance, the second person is always an accomplice, in that closed cab. It had all been prearranged. Mr. Wynne had deliberately made a monkey of him, Stephen Birnes. Reluctantly, the detective permitted himself to remember that he didn't know whether there was anyone in that cab when Mr. Wynne entered it. And then he remembered that he did know one thing, the number of the cab. He arose abruptly with the light of great determination in his face. "Whose diamonds were they?" he demanded. "They were his, as far as we know," replied Mr. Latham. "How much were they worth?" Mr. Latham looked him over thoughtfully. "I am not at liberty to tell you that, Mr. Birnes," he said at last. "There are a great number of them, and they are worth a large sum of money. And they are all unset. That's enough for you to know, I think." It seemed to be quite enough for Mr. Birnes to know. "It may be that I will have something further to report this evening," he told Mr. Latham. "If not, I'll see you tomorrow here." He went out. 10 minutes later he was talking to a friend at police headquarters over the telephone. The records there showed that the license for the particular cab he had followed had been issued to one William Johns. He was usually to be found around the cab stand in Madison Square, and lived in Charlton Street. Chapter 6